Hello everyone and welcome to The Apex, a weekly conversation with the titans and tastemakers of the automotive world. Our guest this week is one of the world's most renowned and influential designers, Frank Stephenson. If you've ever longed for a modern McLaren, admired the rear wing on a Ford Escort RS Cosworth, or just found delight in a modern Mini Cooper or Fiat 500, you'll probably know what it feels like to encounter his elegant design work. He joins us today to tell us a bit more about his inspirations, his design philosophy, and perhaps a few stories from a tremendous career. Frank, thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, guys. Hi, nice to be here.
So just to start, could you briefly tell us about how you got into cars and car design in the first place?
Sure. I think, it's a strange one because I grew up in Morocco, so that's not really car country as we know it. But I did grow up with a father who was very interested in anything mechanical, and especially anything that went fast. So cars naturally came off of the back of that. And in the early 60s, my father started a car dealership, which meant that my summers were spent in the car dealership rather than playing in the playground or anything like that. So I spent a lot of time in my youth growing up in this car dealership and just being exposed to the wonderful world of international cars, because it was a dealership that dealt in different brands and marques and things. So I also grew up with a very artistic mother. My father was very technical, cool, calculated kind of guy. And my mother was on the opposite end of the spectrum. She loved the arts. So I think genetically I was kind of disposed from the get-go to be sort of a artistic scientist or something. I don't know. Anyways, I spent a lot of time drawing cars as a kid in the dealership. And at some point the lever flips and you started wanting to draw cars that you imagine rather than the cars that are sitting there in front of you. And that typically in the world of car design happens around 10 years old with most of us for some strange reason. And of course I started around 10 drawing cars that didn't exist, and without even an ounce of knowledge that they could pay you to do this as a profession. And so weirdly enough, around the age of 22, I discovered the world of professional car design, or at least that there was a potential to turn your drawings into money, I guess. And naturally, you had to go to university to study that, and you couldn't just go straight into being a professional car designer. So I left a professional motorcycle racing career behind reluctantly, and decided to go the way of designing cars for a living, hopefully, because at the point there, you're not really sure if you're going to get a job or not. But luckily, I did survive 4 years of Art Center College of Design. And if you do that, you're pretty much guaranteed to get a job in the industry. So I was I don't know if the right word is cherry picked, but halfway through my university, Ford came along and said, if we pay for the rest of your studies, the next 2 years of your university, will you sign on graduation? And obviously I couldn't turn that offer down because it takes a huge weight off your shoulders. And so I went straight to Ford. That's how I got into car design.
That's fantastic. So speaking of design, you've designed everything from the modern Mini Cooper to extreme performance cars at Ferrari, Maserati and McLaren, and with the Fiat 500 along the way. Do you design your vehicles with a specific kind of person in mind, thinking about the customer who's buying that car, or do you go with the shapes which feel right for the purpose?
Well, it's kind of a triple action, I would say, because when you design a car, you're not designing it for yourself. I mean, you can be very arrogant, and the higher you get up in a company, the more responsibility and power you can have over the design, I guess, because then you're speaking directly to management and the board. But when you're in that phase of designing a car, I think a good lesson for younger designers is to remember they're designing the car for the company, not for themselves. Although the company's paying you as a designer to interpret that potential design as your idea, not as what they want you to design, because you're the professional. That's why they're paying you the big bucks, as they say. So you have to be as individual as possible when you're communicating the answer to the marketing request to build a certain car for a certain segment of the market. Now, the main thing there, I think, is if you're a smart designer, you won't start off like a bat out of hell designing the car. You'll do your research first of what the market in that segment is like, who the competition is, who does it best, in other words, and then that's your target. I think all designers want to do the next big thing, and you can't do that by just thinking like the status quo, like it's normally done. So the cars that have the most impact or the best impact are the ones that are probably pushing the limits in design and giving the engineers headaches right from the start. So yeah, you have to research the market, and you do have to do both. You do have to look at who is the kind of person in mind, as you said, and the car that feels right for you in that market. The making it right for the person means obeying almost the design values of the company you're working with. It's very arrogant if you throw away years of design history, design language of a great brand just to do something that looks completely different. And you need that logo on there to identify the design language. That's the worst thing. Typically, we always say that you should be able to identify the design of the car without any brand logos on the car. So it should reflect the design language, design history, but sort of in a updated, or not even updated, in an innovative way, because you're designing a car that's going to be out in 5 years. There's no way the public knows what they want in 5 years. We're not designing fashion or products or anything like that are in and out in 1 year. So you have to design sort of 5 years into the future, and you have to think even 3 years ahead of that. So it's about 8 years, because when that car comes out, you still want it to look fresh for another 3 years at least, and then there's the facelift. So you're kind of not designing it for a certain person, but for a certain point in the market that will suit the marketing's strategy of what that segment is like. So
would you say that kind of dynamic was more difficult at a Ferrari than a Mini Cooper or a Fiat, or is it all kind of the same?
I think it's kind of all the same. You know, people say, it must be much more exciting designing a supercar than it is to design an Econo box or a A to B car. It's definitely not any more fun or any less fun. The challenges are the same. If they ask you to write a short story or a novel, you're going to put the same kind of effort into both, because what you want at the end is customer, satisfaction and positive reception, and the customer is beside it. You want the reactions to fit. If it's a supercar, it's got to be instant desire, because nobody needs a supercar. It's like you don't need a supercar, but you have to. It's priced at a price point that makes people spend a lot of good money for something that is instantly desirable for them. Whereas on the other end of the market, the A to B cars, we can call them, or the bread and butter cars, those cars have to sell obviously on price. And so they're looking at the best value for a product like that, and obviously quality. But again, it's emotional purchasing that we're talking about. The customer has to feel like that car kind of represents his or her personality, and if you have a dry personality, you don't mind driving a dry looking car. But if you're a outgoing type of person, you're going to want an out looking kind of car. That's just the way people are. They dress the way they are, and their homes reflect that, and so do their purchasing.
So on this kind of theme, what do you think about the recent trend for super exclusive limited runs of hypercars, or pure statement pieces, I think, like Tesla Cybertruck? Yeah. Is that where you think bleeding edge design should be going, or should our focus really be elsewhere?
Well, I find an incredible value to those hyper, super exotic designs. An incredible value. People might think that it's stupid that we design cars that have basically a very low volume, and not many people are ever even going to see a car like that on the street. But look beyond that. That's a very limited way of thinking, I think. No pun intended. But I think we need outrageous designs, much like in fashion. They use haute couture to explore not necessarily what the customer wants, because where are you going to go in a haute couture? Your partner, say your girlfriend, is dressed in haute couture, you're going to think, people are going to think she's a bit mad or over the top. But at the same time, what they do is help us develop technology at the extreme end of the market that can or cannot be practical or usable or whatever, but the good stuff typically is very expensive to design, and that into the market welcomes that type of design, such that if it is good design, it trickles down eventually into the usable segments. So we do need that high end that presses, the love it, hate it kind of reaction, where it's almost a test bed for design taste and engineering technology, everything that sort of you would never attempt to bring that into a high volume car segment. So I 100%, 110% stand behind that upper end of the segment, simply because viewing it as more than just an attention getter, I think it's more of a technology test bed and design test bed. So all marks to any of those companies that push the limits with their concept cars.
And I know that you put a video out recently discussing the design of the Tesla Cybertruck and your opinions on that. I mean, from an aesthetic and technological point of view, could you tell us a bit more about your thoughts on what I think most people recognize as quite an extreme, even for, a modern cutting edge car company, an extreme design?
Yeah, I mean, let's, there's two camps, two ways of looking at it, technology or design. Technology, it's interesting. Obviously, nobody has ever done, tank designers do it maybe, or armored bunker designers do it. So you take a little bit of influence like that. But I can only think of violent situations or very, as I called it, sort of post-Apple, sort of the dystopia type of situation where you would need a product like that, where you're not worried about damaging the vehicle and you're safe in your cocoon and all that. So perhaps there is a need for that type of vehicle in industrial usage. If you're, I don't know, out in the fields working or at some industrial site, perhaps. But in the world of car design, that vehicle makes zero. If there's any number less than zero, I'd give it less than that sense, because we're talking about products that people are buying and using. And you can say, okay, look at it from the advantage that it doesn't scratch, doesn't need paint, it's sturdy, you can't make a dent. Okay, but that's kind of like starting out with a negative approach to life. It just turns me completely off. And people say, oh, you're an old fart, you don't really, you just want to hold on to the past and not think about things in the future. Yeah, but I mean, if you want to look at it that way, look at it this way: the cars that turn me on, or even anything that turns me on, is basically good design. In other words, you look at a car that keeps its design value no matter what period of time we're looking at it. That could be the Alfa Romeo, Tipo 33 Stradale. In terms of people, Sophia Loren is going to look beautiful forever to us. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, I can't even say the word. Fifth Symphony, it's going to sound great forever. Whereas the Tesla Cybertruck for me is, I don't know, it's more like the Elephant Man or some kind of strange music that, doesn't make any sense at all. I don't know. It's just a moment in time that you will get people who like it for what it is, but on a grand scale, it's not done. It's not done in a smart way, I think. And technology, great. Design-wise, people say you're restricted by the technology, the use of materials. That's hogwash. You can do anything with any type of material if you find a way to do it. And you're limiting yourself when you say, well, that's the only way you can bend metal, or that kind of stainless steel. It doesn't have to look that bad or that basic, I guess you could say.
And is this where you'd bring in, I know another theme that you're quite passionate about is using cues from the natural world to influence the way that you design cars?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, it can also sound hokey pokey when I say I want everything to look like it's designed by nature. The only thing I mean when I say designed by nature is that everything in nature is designed to win, to succeed, and to be the best solution out there. And so that in itself is my inspiration. Not that it has to look like a tree or it has to look like a rock, or I don't know, whatever. The inspiration of how that shape is determined or arrived at means that there's an intelligent reason for the design to be that way. It's not haphazard. And the designs that don't conform, say, to the laws or let's call them the principles of good design, just jar. I mean, the ratio, there's a in biomimicry, which is the science of using nature as a design inspiration. There are certain laws of proportion which just do not change in nature, and that's why we typically are wired to see things as being beautiful or not. And you can say, okay, beauty is subjective or in the eyes of the beholder, but it's very hard to take something that is absolutely gorgeous and using those laws of proportion and criticize it from good design, saying it's not good design. That's just a reflection of bad taste. Everybody has an opinion, but not everybody has good taste or not. So if you're designing something within the golden law of proportion, as we call it, typically that design results in a very well-balanced, agreeable design. It's not old-fashioned or anything like that. It just feels right. It's that main selling point of a design that I think is important, which is love at first sight. You look at something, it feels right, and it doesn't take you hardly any time at all to get used to it. It might be innovative, and you've never seen it before, but as long as it achieves that instant desirable emotional factor, then you're winning with that.
That's a really interesting way of putting it. And so just to broaden out slightly before we get into some car stuff, in recent years, you've set up the Frank Stephenson Design Consultancy, where you work on much more than just cars. What projects are you currently working on that you could tell us about, and what excites you about them?
Well, people probably wonder why you've got to admit, I would, if I was in the car design profession, that, head honcho at McLaren has to be pretty fun and a pretty satisfying position. Yet, once you've done it, over a period of a decade or so, and I came in at the very grassroots, I guess, of McLaren Automotive, where we had to establish a design language and we had to sort of achieve a level that was respected in the super and hypercar segments. And we did that with the sports car, the 570, the supercar and the hypercar. So as soon as I did that, I thought, well, now it's time to really, really think, am I happy? And I was happy, but the result of having done it after one decade meant that I was going to repeat another decade of renewing those cars. And once you've done it, you've done it. It's like anything. You always aspire to something higher. And once you've done it, it's kind of behind you. And you can either challenge yourself to take it to the next level, or you can veer off and do a rethink, which is what I did. And I thought, not a lot of people are going to see these McLarens or own these McLarens. And what I want to do is at that stage in my life, it just felt right. I'd been in there for just over 3 decades of car design. I thought, I've learned quite a bit and I haven't really put my foot wrong yet. So why don't I just get out and start doing stuff that can really make an impact on a more expansive, I guess, level, which is reaching out or doing design for a lot larger segment of people and just take on projects that can make a huge difference in society. Sounds kind of, that, I guess. But at the same time, you think about it, and if you're in that position, it does make a lot of sense to give back at that stage. So I wanted to get out, start my own design consultancy, and not have the marketing department tell me what to do, but rather be able to choose. So I set up the consultancy with 4 primary, I guess, or 4 filters, which was if the design project I was being asked to do, first of all, was innovative. In other words, it brought in new technology. That was one of the filters. The second was that it had to be the best in its segment, not necessarily expensive, but the best of the best in its segment, which means you're aiming high. The third was that it had to use sustainable materials, which is the big buzzword in today's design world, is sustainability. And the fourth was that it had to be allowed to use biomimicry or nature, I guess, as the design inspiration. As long as the project met those 4 filters or passed those 4 filters, then it was probably going to be a great project to work on. And so I kept that philosophy, and right away it started allowing me to just work on projects that were going to make a huge impact, I guess. The first one that came along was this new age of mobility that we're looking at, which are the flying taxis. And this is not really saying the future, because it's happening now. Just people are behind the scenes know about it, and people out there don't know too much about it. But within this decade, around the middle of this decade, we're going to be seeing taxis that you order up like an Uber that land in 11 square meters of space. You get into the pod, it goes straight up into the sky electrically, and then it flies you on as the crow flies, or as the bird flies, straight to your destination and lands vertically. And it'll be quite an experience, and timing and all that and safety obviously is the most important thing. So these eVTOL aircraft are going to be the future way, not necessarily eliminating any other type of transport like trains or cars, obviously, or planes, big airplanes, but it's another way to get you to your destination in a much more efficient way. So that's coming, and I've been working on 2 different projects. I finished one and moved on to another one in another part of the world, because it's happening everywhere now. And the next project I also got involved with was designing what should be, and well, it is right now. It's we've tested it and everything, so we're sure about it. But the safest infant car seat on the market for your most prized possession. And so it's using high-end technology that's used in armored vehicles to absorb energy on impact. So your child should be at least 70% or around 70% safer in one of these seats than in any other competitive seat, baby car seat on the market. It looks incredibly advanced. It looks like no other car seat on the market, but it still is, your mummy's going to love it, because she'll just want to hold on to it, cuddle it. Yeah. And so it's not a machine. It's just very high tech and looks cuddly at the same time. So I've been doing that. I've been working on watches for not even air, space, land, and deep sea. So that's a special project I'm working on. I've been involved, or I'm starting to get involved in right now, in the first 2 cars that are going to race on the lunar surface. They're going up in October of 21 on SpaceX. And that's an incredibly exciting program, because from a design point of view, you would think, why did they hire a designer to be the head of the design of this vehicle when it's just pure engineering? But at the same time, these things have to look advanced, and there's a lot of design knowledge that you can use from having studied what I've been exposed to in high-end hypercar, where it's weight and power and things like that. It's not so much aerodynamics, because there's not a lot of downforce on the moon, but it's these things have to be designed correctly. Design is not art. Design has never been art for me. It's that's what I love about it. It's a combination of art and science. So that's the attractive part of that. And that's also a part of the educational side, where we're bringing in young people being advised by scientists, reputable design scientists, and also as a pre-development program for the lunar rover that's going to go up in 2024. So there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, I could go on and on, but
no, I mean, that's an incredible breadth of work. I think that's absolutely fascinating. I thought that, given we've got about 10 minutes left, I thought we'd bring it back to some of the questions that I think car enthusiasts would want to know. The first is there a designer that you hold or held as your role model, or any people who have particularly inspired the way that you design and or think about car design?
Absolutely. But he's dead now. I mean, he hasn't been around for a few years. Da Vinci, this Italian dude. I just loved the way he was the old. I mean, you talk about the Renaissance man. He is the Renaissance man. Everything after that was kind of Renaissance. But I just liked the range of thought that he applied to every aspect of. I mean, he was. I don't even think genius fits the description of this guy. He could do anything pretty much and be the ultimate in it. I mean, he was, a doctor almost. He did so much research into the human body and organisms and things, but he looked at it from a purely scientific way. But he had a touch for aesthetics that was unrivaled. Also, I mean, look at his paintings and the way he invented stuff that today makes sense. Back then, it was probably looked at as a half nuts, half crazy guy, but good designers are half nuts anyways, or we have to be different at least to be able to think like that. But he was wired in a really interesting way. So he definitely is somebody I would have loved to have lunch with,
That's a brilliant answer. I think on reflection, it's not one that I would have expected, but when you think about it, it completely makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that the second question I wanted to ask was, is there a particular innovation in car design that you'd like to see more of?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So car design, being that we're talking about the earth, means that we have to deal with a lot of problems. One of them obviously is accidents and safety, and the other one is mostly in efficiency. So the safety part, obviously, Mercedes, I think, is even leading the way in terms of being able to look around corners, and Tesla's doing the autonomous thing, which I don't really put a lot of faith in level 5 yet, maybe in 50 years from now. But until all cars drive at level 5, you're not going to be safe out there. You have a dumb car crashing into a smart car because, it's just going to happen. Unless the level 5 car can repel the dumb car, it's not going to happen. It'll happen in the sky much sooner. But yeah, so the exterior is obviously one thing. Gosh, I just went off track with my mind. I had some great things on. So from the efficiency point of view, sorry, I'll get back on track now. The efficiency side, obviously, for me, now a lot of people probably won't agree with me, but for certain reasons. But I'm pretty confident I could shoot down their replies. Electric is not as efficient as people think it is. It's typically, it depends on how fast or how much you use your electric car, how zippy you want to drive it around. But you're going to be driving at least 20,000 miles, anywhere between 20 to 40,000 miles before you balance out the equation of it compared to a ICE engine. In other words, you're not getting the benefit right away. You're not offsetting the carbon with an electric car as soon as you buy it. It takes a lot of carbon to get that car on the road. And so the electric propulsion method for me has always been, not always, but I've learned more about it, since it's become a thing, is a stopgap solution. I don't even call it a solution. It's just a stopgap thing, because until we actually get cars on the road that are zero, carbon footprint, that is not advancing society or propulsion methods or anything like that. The big one, the one that I think, or two solutions that I think we should be looking at in the car industry, is one is biodegradable fuels, so environmentally friendly fuels, which will allow you to still run ICE engines, which in the next step allows you to still have that emotion that a ICE engine gives us. There are a lot of people that don't care about that, and they just want to get from here to there, and they're not interested in about the vibrations or the sounds of a Ferrari engine. Okay, that's one generation, but at the same time, if you can produce a car that runs on very clean biofuels, that is somewhere where we should be going. Or hydrogen, obviously, because hydrogen is just putting out H2O. And that for me is a great, great solution. We already have trucks and other vehicles using hydrogen. So that would be the other investigation, I think, in terms of propulsion. And the other one that is very important is because what I said at the beginning, cars are on the earth. We have to make sure that they're as efficient as possible when they're traveling. If they start, having to penetrate the wind, then the handling and the aesthetics of the car are going to come into question, because a car at low speed can look generally however you want it. A car at higher speed, which would make transportation more efficient the faster you can go, and safely, obviously. But then that car at speed, what we don't want to do is have items tacked onto the car that make it look like some kind of boy racer. And the way around that is what we call active aerodynamics. And so I think one of the first cars to do that might be the McLaren Speedtail, where the actual body of the car transforms or modifies itself the faster you go. So you have a wing on the back. And that's just the first easy step. But I'm talking about body panels that that shape themselves according to the speed. And there are a lot of animals in nature that do that. A lot of them change their shape to be more efficient at certain speeds, or to brake or to turn or anything like that. But these birds don't have spoilers tacked onto them or anything like that. It's body morphine, So if we can get cars to become actively aerodynamic, responding to certain conditions in a corner or acceleration, downforce, whatever, I don't know, that would be a great step forward. So we'd be looking at cars that actually look like they're alive rather than static, with help of crutches and things like that.
Yeah. Well, that's an amazing vision of the future, and that's lots of very interesting ideas there. So I think the final question I wanted to ask you, and if we can cast our minds back over design history, and it's really a personal one, is there a car you wish you had had a chance to design or work on?
The Mini? No, not the Mini. I already did one. No, I don't want. Sorry about that. No. I mean, it's hard to say. There's so many cars out there that get me excited. I would have loved to work on all of them, but if you got to choose one, and I know most people know what my favorite car ever has been, but it would probably be the first Jag E-Type, the one in the early 60s that lasted to the mid-ish 60s, because that car for me was amazing in the sense that it wasn't designed by a designer. It was designed by an aerodynamicist, Malcolm Sayer. And so he used kind of very pure geometric design to create a shape that still to this day just makes my hair stand up on my arm, sort of gives me goosebumps. But that for sure, I did a redesign of it on one of my YouTube channels where I kind of put myself into that position in time and thought if I'd have done it, which is being very, very arrogant, but at the same time, if there had been a second proposal for that car, how would I have taken that same car and designed it thinking of the same design methods they had back then? It's very easy to make a car today that looks much more futuristic than the E-Type, but if you try to restrain yourself and think, okay, this is all they could have done back then in 60 or 61, this is pretty much what could have also happened. And so I did that, but it doesn't change it very much. It's just tuning it slightly and tweaking it here and there. The car is fabulous. So I would have loved to have been involved in that first E-Type project.
Wow. Well, what a fantastic note to end on. Frank, I think that's all we've got time for today. So thank you for a fascinating interview and a real insight into your life and work. It's been great having you along.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hector.
Thank you.